Hey, Ange.
Hey Les, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
You look great.
Nice to see you, pal.
Thank you. Good to see you too. Good to
Welcome
see
to
you too.
another episode of Black Boomer Besties from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. I put a little extra into that one, a little
That
extra sauce.
I appreciated it. I appreciated it. I'm wearing these glasses today that I haven't worn in years, probably more
What?
than 5 or 6 years. So they're a little scratched. So I'm kind of like, am I seeing right? It's like,
You're
am I
squinty.
looking like Mr. Magoo? What? That we're
You're
showing our
showing your
age when
age.
I
Yeah.
say Mr. Magoo for sure.
Jinx. Pinch you, jinx.
Anyway, there's a couple things in the news that
Ah, I've been consumed. Listen, you know that I've been really good at getting at least 7 hours sleep. And I have literally changed my sleeping habits from staying up all night
hmm
and sleeping in, getting my 7 hours, to waking up 7:30, 8 o'clock,
I
8:30
know.
maybe.
But you've been doing
Yeah,
that a little while now, months
I
or a year
know.
at
It's
least.
it's completely, probably, I would say 6 months comfortably.
Welcome to my world.
I ain't getting into that world. Sorry. Sorry. I like being right over here and like say, hey world, hey Leslie's world.
Right, right, right. But I'm
I'll
up
say
at 5:30 every day,
I'll
you
say
know.
hey from afar. No, but last night I was so utterly consumed by what we're gonna talk about today
Which
that
is
whew, Fani Willis and the other I don't even know what the term is because these people are not, they're, it's not a prosecution per se. It's not,
mm-mm. It's not a
so I'm not,
trial.
it's
It's
not
a
a
hearing.
trial.
It's a
It's a
hearing.
hearing, right?
hmm
So her testimony and that of, you have to help me with the names, Davis?
I'm not
The,
sure who.
the DA, the other DA who she hired, what this
Oh,
whole
his name
controversy
is
about.
Wade.
Wade,
Wade.
that's right.
hmm
That's right. His first name is?
Can't
What's his
recall.
first name? Okay. Wade. They kept calling him Mr. Willis. I thought that was so hilarious.
Yeah.
And also her former friend who testified as well, and her Fani Willis's father who
hmm
testified. I have been sucked in. My sister yesterday said, "You sound like Mummy," because my mother, first it was with oh my lord, first name Anita, last
Oh,
name
Anita
is
Hill.
Anita Hill,
hmm
when she was testifying against Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas before he
hmm
became justice. And also my mother was consumed with the OJ trial.
Right,
Like
right. I
you could
remember that. Old
not.
school. Yeah, yeah.
So I felt like my mother, I could not go to
Watching all
sleep.
of the
All
testimony
of
and
them.
the
Like I
conversation.
didn't watch snippets. I watched the entire
And many of them were
hours.
hours long. So you would watch them and say, Les, did you hear such and such? And I'm like, of course not. And then so you would send me a link and I'm like, okay, send me the link. I'll listen and give you my opinion.
Oh
So
my
now
gosh.
I've been listening too. But
Yeah.
but let's dig in a little bit because
Okay.
I've seen YouTube videos of the actual testimony, but then I've also seen people's opinion about the testimony, and it
Okay.
really goes
Yes.
both sides.
Right. Right.
Very many videos are out there supporting her and her testimony. And then I saw a few that, spoke about how inappropriate they thought that she
Right.
was in her
Oh, they were
testimony
highly, highly
and
critical.
whatever. One such Well, it's a podcast actually. It's called the Standard of Truth podcast.
Okay.
And we'll attach the link to it so people can form an opinion of their own. But it's a pretty popular podcast. And The host, I don't even know her name, but she really castigated DA Willis and her testimony. And what I thought was I didn't particularly agree with per se was some of the other comments she made that were really personal and outside of the testimony itself and the reason for the hearing.
Right. Yeah. And you sent it to me and I got hot. I know sometimes, like you and I both do this, we don't like being in an echo chamber, like living in an echo chamber. We listen to opposing views on things pretty
Yeah,
regularly.
often. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this was me doing that when you sent me this link because you know I have some very strong opinions about the ways that the expectations that we place on each other as Black people. You know, I really challenge the notion of Black excellence and what it means, not that Black people ought not be excellent, but Black excellence as an idea
Or a
around
tome.
right, you know, showing up perfect. Michelle Obama, President Obama, that beyond reproach, no one should be able to say anything negative about you. You should live your life as if you lived in a glass house. And that concept of Black excellence is what I strongly, strongly, strongly
And
think is
and
damaging to us.
and these folk are not allowed to show any
Yeah,
human characteristics.
right,
I
right.
remember Obama was criticized because he wore a tan suit. Maybe tan
Tan
is his favorite
suit,
color.
a
Maybe he
tan
wanted to
suit.
express himself in a color that he thought he looked good in, and he did.
And he did.
But I just remember how much it was frontline news about what this
Yes,
president of the United States wore.
yes,
When
yes.
we're
I
used to
remember
seeing
that.
him in in darker suits.
Right,
And
right.
some of the newsprint that I saw contrasted actually prior presidents, Reagan for one, I recall, wearing lighter color suits.
Yeah,
But because
yeah,
we Black folk are not
yeah,
allowed to deviate from this very narrowly prescribed lane,
yeah.
any deviation from it is inappropriate or
Right.
certainly worthy of media fodder.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we expect that from people outside of the Black community. And my dream is that Black people can find safety within the Black community. And we don't have, and you know, I'm in a way, I'm kind of having these extraordinary expectations of our community also. So I have to check myself on that because we're people.
And we have
We are,
opinions.
we have opinions
Yeah.
and all of those things. I just really, really, really dug Fani Willis and what she represented, how she represented. I really dug her imperfections. I fell in love with her father. Her father. Her father. If you guys have not seen her father and get a sense of who this man is, the international he presented at The Hague, right?
Yeah, The Hague.
The
And
Hague.
he served in South and lived in South Africa immediately following Mandela's freedom and his
Yes.
ascension to the presidency.
Presidency. I know
Um,
he was a part of Rwanda's Truth and Justice Reconciliation
yes,
also. So
yes.
this amazing man and
With, as they would say, with hella credentials.
with
Yeah.
hella credentials. And the way that through both of their testimonies, I think primarily, I'll speak on the gentleman in a moment, but through their testimony, to me, you saw a view of Black culture that
Oh,
you normally don't see in these situations, and
oh,
I'm all for it. I'm all
yeah.
for
It
it.
it kind
All
of warmed my
for it.
heart. Can I cut you off as I always
Yes.
do? I'm sorry.
No, you're
But I
allowed.
always do. But you say things and I get like entranced and then I start like, and then it's like, let's speak up. But anyway, can we just go back a little bit for the people who may have been under a rock for the last few days
Sure.
and not
Yeah,
really
yeah.
know what is this hearing about? And what is the purpose of it? Because in my
Okay.
opinion, I think we're losing the forest for the trees.
Okay. Yes. So the district attorney, Fani Willis,
Fulton
brought
County,
charges
Georgia.
from Fulton County, Georgia, brought charges against the former president for interfering with election, with the 2020 elections.
In Georgia.
And in Georgia, if you remember, he actually called Kemp,
Hoffensberger.
Hoffensberger, right, and asked him to find 11,000 or so votes so that he could win Georgia. That and several other charges were brought against him. Several other actions were pulled into the charges presented against he, but not only the former president, also
18 other co-defendants.
18 other. Yeah. So one of those co-defendants came to find out that DA Willis was having a romantic relationship with another DA that she appointed as the lead prosecutor. And so they are contending that she should be removed from the case. And by the way, when they're saying she should be removed, her entire office would be removed. So anything that has been done to bring the case to this point would be scratched.
I wasn't aware of that
Yeah, I
nuance.
found that out last night at about three
Ah,
o'clock.
but the other thing that there are already, um, I started to say alleged people that were accused, but they're no longer alleged because they've pled guilty to many of the charges.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Of
there
the
are
co-defendants.
of
Yeah,
the 18 co-defendants,
yeah.
I don't know the number, but
Yeah,
several of them have already pled guilty to certain amount of charges,
right,
and their
right.
cases are removed from this, and there are
Yeah.
a few remaining.
Yeah, I think four or five are remaining,
I
just
see.
based on, because each of their representative, their lawyers were there. But the final piece of just kind of setting the context for this is that they are claiming that she hired Wade. She
Hmm.
hired
Mr. Wade,
Wade
yeah.
in order to get money, right? So somehow their relationship would cause her to get some kickbacks, let's say. So
And that's what it is. It's a
that's the
kickback
claim.
charge. So we're not talking
Exactly.
about the ethical charge. There
Right.
is an allegation of kickback impropriety because
Yes.
if she, as the prosecutor, has a relationship with someone on her team who gets paid by taxpayers,
Right.
then she might, in fact, benefit financially from having a romantic relationship with them if there's some exchange of money between the
Right.
two of them. And that's
Right.
the whole
Right.
charge. So this
Right.
hearing is to determine if, in fact, that happened
Yeah.
was there any exchange of finances, thereby making her guilty of a kickback charge or whatever? And it
Right.
says, and it, I gotta say, they're not talking about any ethical considerations of their a union of either
Oh, they
us.
are.
Well,
They're
no, no,
they're
no.
yeah, legally.
That's not the legal
Yeah.
charge.
Right. Right.
I'm glad that you interjected in that way because I gotta say, for the last 2 days, what I've only really heard is the salaciousness
Yeah.
and the airing of her and his perhaps dirty laundry
Yeah.
in public.
Yes.
And I have a couple thoughts about that.
Yeah. Well, it gets really into the muckety muck because the the co-defendant that brought the charge, right, the main one, I don't know the person's name,
Hmm.
but their lawyer, her name is, it'll come to me,
Right.
Marshall. I think her name is Marshall.
No, it's not Marshall, but it starts
Yeah,
with an M.
Cross is Fani's.
Right. I
It's, you
don't know.
don't think it's that?
There's so
Anyway,
many names now in my head right now that no.
she's the blonde. If you watch,
Okay. Okay.
um, what she has presented in her filing that DA Willis and Mr. Wade were actually living together,
Mm.
and um, and
Okay.
so, but I'm gonna. So I say that because you have to understand how angry DA Willis was, because this is now in the public. You can have opinions about whether this relationship was appropriate or not,
Hmm.
but there's no need to lie. And once a lie is out,
What do
you
you mean
know,
there's no need to lie? There's always
well,
a need to lie for people. They want to win.
they
They
want to
want
win,
to get their point.
but if you believe that you have a case, then you should try the case. You
You
shouldn't
should,
try
right?
lies.
Right? The
Yeah,
truth should work, right?
yeah, that and
I mean, you know how
you
I
know,
feel about the
and
truth.
there used to be a time when that's kind of how things were done. You
Yeah.
argued, basically to the death, but you didn't. It wasn't a lie for lie thing. You know what I mean? It wasn't a battle of untruths. But I want to come back to one of the things that I loved seeing. And in a way, I did that smile because it reminded me of something that happened in the theater when I was working on The Color Purple. And there was an intimate scene between Celie and Shug Avery when Celie was combing her hair and scratching her scalp. And how important that scene was to me, so much so that I asked the director if Suge could be unwigged at that point so that it would be an authentic moment between two black women, one caring for the other in this really
Hmm.
intimate way
The
that shows up in
cultural
our culture.
connection you
Yeah,
recognized. Hmm.
yeah. And so that came to mind because what I love seeing for the world to see is the way that Fani said that D.A. Willis, I'll put some respect on her name, D.A. Willis said that she paid back everything that was spent as they went on trips. He would, because he's the traveler, he would put it on his, and she would pay him back every time in
Hmm.
cash. And they really, the lawyers who were on the opposing side really leaned in. They started using the word hoarding cash. They started framing it like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, this is what black people do. She's like,
And
my
stop
go.
right there because the whole 2 days I spent watching
Yeah,
this testimony back and
yeah.
forth, I realized that if a black person were watching this and a
Mhm.
white person were watching this,
Yeah,
we saw two different testimonies
yeah. It's
and
like the
had two
OJ.
different mindsets.
Yeah, yeah,
It revealed some nuances that I didn't even realize were cultural or endemic to the Black culture or
yeah.
Black people.
Like what?
But when she spoke about, or when I heard the dad speak
Yes, the
about,
dad
I
more so.
always keep cash in my
Yeah,
house.
yeah, yeah. There's a
I
historical
grew up with
reason
that. I
for it.
grew up with my
Yeah.
grandparents and my great grandparents, and we
Yes.
always had a shoebox
Yes.
of money, of
Yes.
cash.
Hmm.
I know that my family members have had or have cash in aluminum foil in the freezer. People
Yeah.
don't realize
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
there's a whole population of Black folk that have been unbanked
Yes.
culturally for years and
Yes. Yes.
generations.
Yes.
You
And
all may
why?
not remember that
Yeah.
there are banks that wouldn't do business with Black people.
Right. And banks that
Theft is a
folded.
big problem.
Yes.
Remember, when we owned our own banks in Oklahoma, they were bombed and razed to the ground.
Yes. Right.
So,
Right.
so many of these cultural nuances that came
Hmm.
out of in testimony, for example,
Yes.
always keep cash on you.
Yeah.
I keep cash in my car. In
Okay.
every car I own, there's cash in
Yes.
there, just in case.
Yeah.
I have cash right now in my home. I
Mm-hmm.
have cards in my, and I use
Mm-hmm.
cards, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you ain't gonna find me stranded out there.
No. 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 No.
And when she said that she really uses her currency, maybe cash, or I save money as cash, people looked at her like she had two heads, certainly like she was
Yeah.
lying and they were impugning her credibility.
Yeah.
Um, that's not true.
It's not.
And
And
I
they've
don't,
really,
hey,
they've
it's a
really,
black thing. I don't
it's a
expect
black
you
thing.
to
I
understand.
know, and that's exactly what her father said. He said,
Hmm.
I don't mean to be racist. He was such a charming old man.
Yeah. But
I
he
don't mean
gave
to
an
be racist,
instance
but
where
it's a black
they
thing.
didn't
Yeah,
accept his credit cards and he had to
right.
use the cash that he had on hand. We've all had
Exactly.
experiences where people have looked at
Exactly.
us askance when we've
Yeah,
pulled out a check or a
right.
credit card. Is this
Yes.
you? Do you have another form of ID?
ID.
We've all,
Yeah.
to this day, we've
Yes.
experienced that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I remember a few months ago, I went to a walking tour of Durham, North Carolina, and it was a really central part of Black thought during the civil rights movement. And one of the largest actually, Black owned insurance company was, is in Durham. And so I learned even more about how and why insurance became such an important part of the Black community. It's because banks would steal from them. Like they
Mm.
would, either the bank would dissolve and they wouldn't give them their money. The money left, and so they had insurance companies did that also, and so they started. So
Hmm.
there's this legacy of theft
Hmm.
of
And loss. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And so this idea, you keep money. Her father told her she should have 6 months of living expenses in her home and gave her a safe to put it in.
Yeah, a
And these people
lockbox.
are
And she
these
said her
people are
father had
saying,
three.
These
street
people are
life.
saying, "Oh, do you have ATM receipts to show us that you took this money out?" She was like, "Wherever I lay my head, I have money."
Hmm.
And they're looking at her like she's crazy.
Yeah, because they can't relate because they haven't had the experiences in banking and theft that we've had generationally.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really something. Can you go back to what you talked about Black excellence? Because
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
I think it's important to mention in this case about some of the criticisms I see of DA Willis's testimony and this hearing in general, that because she was romantically involved with a man who was currently married, that therefore her legacy and her experience as a successful prosecutor does not count
Yes.
in this regard, and she is no I look at it as because of her humanness flaws. I mean, we're Christian women, so we are not excusing the impropriety of what she did, but as far as I'm concerned, the who is without,
Sin.
you know,
You know,
we're
Les,
not talking about that. I would love this hearing to be concentrated on, did she did she hire this person in order to get financial gain and thus causing an impeachable offense that she should be off of this hearing?
right,
Remember,
right.
what she said was really telling. I am not on trial because this is a hearing, not a trial. I am not on trial. The person who tried to steal the election in 2020 is on trial.
Yeah, the persons. Yes. Yeah,
And it seems like we're forgetting that point.
right, right. Well, so this is my understanding of the married. I would say technically he was married. Yes. If,
Not technically,
black
he
and white.
was married, right?
Yeah. How, yeah, Les, but if you heard his testimony,
I did
what you know is that his wife had an affair.
in 2015.
He told his wife that they were going to divorce, and they agreed that they would divorce when their youngest child went off to school.
Hmm.
And so, yes, but these people were not it was married in name only. It was not they were not in relationship as husband and wife, is my understanding.
I get
The other
that.
thing I want to say
Hmm.
is because it goes to the humanness, and when we hear adulteress and those types of language, there's a whole spectrum of what that looks like to people.
Yeah.
There's a homewrecker. There's
You broke up
you
my
saw somebody's
marriage.
man
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
took and so I just want to make that clear. You
yeah.
can judge that either way. But the other thing that I would like to say is that a very vulnerable moment that came up for DA Willis is that when she became DA, and I guess in the months prior to that, her home was constantly vandalized. Her father testified that they would spray the B word, the N word, and she had to have a security detail.
Hmm.
She left her home that she bought and paid for at her father's insistence, and her father did not want to know where he never even knew where she moved to because he did not want anyone to torture him to get that information from him.
Hmm.
So he never visited her.
Hmm.
So I say all that because she became a very lonely person.
Hmm.
and she talked about her
And
50th.
sacrificed her social life because of
Yes,
the or her job.
right. She talked about her 50th birthday and that it was miserable because she spent it alone. She couldn't. So I'm just and bringing it back to this idea of perfection that we have for one another, and this, your life has to be without reproach. That is stifling.
Hmm.
Whether you have anything that someone would bring under scrutiny or not, if you believe that that is the way that you're meant to live and your humanness is is to always be controlled
And dimmed.
and
Yeah, yeah. I gotta tell you, I grew up, as I've mentioned just now, and probably many times, I grew up with my grandparents and my great grandparents, I was blessed to say.
five
But
generations of
yeah, yeah, people in my home.
family. Yeah, yeah,
And I recall so often, I mean, we were children, but Nana, all of the nanas would tell us to kind of like pipe down in public because we were Black children.
yeah,
She didn't want other people looking at us. We couldn't be too loud in public. Children are loud in public. There were three of us. We were having a good old time in church and in restaurants and wherever we went. But we always had to be mindful of our behavior,
yeah,
not because we were just typical children, but because we were Black children.
right, right,
Definitely, no doubt about it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's legacy also because this stuff makes me so sad.
And I grew
You
up in
know,
New York City. Could you imagine
yeah,
how my grandparents would have had to admonish me if we were in the South in the
yeah,
early 60s?
yeah.
Look what happened to Emmett Till,
I was
a
thinking the
person from
same
Chicago who just
thing.
went on vacation
I
in the
was thinking the
South and
same
lost
thing.
his life in the most
Yeah.
horrendous way.
Noisy black children,
Yeah. And
outstanding black children are in danger.
yeah,
They're in
yeah.
danger, and your grand grandmothers knew this. That was their existence.
So when I think of some of the criticism of D.A. Willis's testimony and her tone during it, first of all, it's embarrassing to have her personal life put in public in this way. That's one thing. So you got to feel a certain kind of way. I felt badly for her in that
Yeah,
regard. But the other thing is that who wouldn't be angry?
yeah. Les, they were outright lies. So it's not that her business was public, but there were lies according to her. There were lies that were printed in the lawyers.
Hmm. And she held them up and said that you've
Yeah, and
lied
there
in
was
this case,
and there was
on
no
several
evidence.
instances.
Right. There was
And
no
is this
evidence of
all
it.
because she's prosecuting and have found many guilty already,
Yes.
a
Yeah.
crime against the Constitution of the United States?
Right. Right.
It's her job.
Yes. It's her literal
It's
job.
her literal job to do this. And as a result, she is being one accused of impropriety in the way that I mentioned earlier. She has
Yeah.
been run out of her home in the way that we just talked about.
Yeah.
And now she is not supposed to get indignant and you're arrogant and you act hood and this
Mhm.
and that. She is
Mhm.
supposed to stifle her personality and her anger lest she be called an arrogant Black woman or
Yes.
this. We are not allowed to
Mhm.
be indignant
Yeah.
about what we think is transgressions and it's
Right. I mean, this idea of, always being classy. It's a beautiful thing to see. I remember Isaiah talks about that when he goes to an HBCU, my youngest, and he says to me often, "Mom, it's so good to see Black people doing well." You know what I mean? Because when they have events and they homecoming and things like that. Their network of alumni is the strongest that I've ever seen. It's world renowned. And so the idea, and when I see pictures of the Harlem Renaissance and the folks in Chicago, there's some iconic photographs. I remember you had one. I think some
Hmm.
young men
Yeah.
sitting around a car. It's beautiful to see us living in these these I'm going to say elevated for less of a lack of a
Right. And
better
I was
word.
going
Yeah.
to say grand in
Yeah.
grand ways or
Right.
grandeur.
Right.
However, they're kind of normal ways.
The
They're
thing
kind
is
of
that if
normal.
that is if that is what is expected, and anything other than that is shunned, is we don't use the term you're a credit to your race, or you're a discredit to your race anymore, but we certainly act that way.
And when you say we, I'm hearing Black people
Yeah, like
and
the woman, yeah,
yeah,
like the podcast that you mentioned,
yeah, yeah.
because I mean,
That
she even
why,
went in
yeah.
on, she should be wearing Spanx, and
And
there's
clothing
a
and stuff. Why? You're not supposed to be comfortable. What if I don't want my fat to be contained while I'm giving testimony?
and what if
You know?
she might have had it on, but she was in the back. She literally said she was pacing in the back. She might have taken it off because it was uncomfortable.
And why are we even discussing
Why
what
are
she
we
had on?
even
You know,
talking about
it's
this?
such a middle school mean girl thing to
Yes,
say if
mean
you
girl.
have nothing substantive to
Right,
say.
right,
To
right.
criticize someone's personal appearance, really? That's where we're going in
Yeah,
2024 when you're speaking about
yeah.
a district attorney?
Who's doing the job that she's doing? Who's trying to
You know?
save our democracy? Yeah, I
You know?
really, I'm cutting her all kinds of slack, and love to hear opinions on this.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that is how, I really think that there, as in any other group of people, we need to be more accepting of the range of ways that we show up. We shouldn't be
Hmm.
expected to be model citizens. You know, growing up as an immigrant, this idea of the model immigrant, there's certain ways that we should behave because we don't want to be seen as, you know, those black people. We want to be seen as these black people. We want to be more accepted.
Hmm.
Those types of
Hmm.
things I utterly reject. Utterly reject.
Yeah.
Utterly
And the
reject.
division, stigma, and the pressure that that type of thinking puts on, interpersonal relationships. I mean, look at
Right,
you.
right,
You're an
right.
immigrant, and here I am, an American. And, we fortunately have these types of conversations about
Yeah,
it and stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's really something else.
Well,
Well, I heart you. I want to see the heart again on
wait,
this thing. I
am I
heart
doing it?
you. Come on.
Oh,
Come
I don't think
on.
mine does it.
Yours does not because you don't have
You see, my
you
camera is
know, come
responding.
on. I heart you.
I heart you too.
Oh,
It's
it
not
didn't do
doing
it
it.
this time. It didn't
Mine
do it.
isn't doing
All
it.
right.
What, is it some AI
Thumbs
thing?
up. Thumbs up. Anyway.
It won't do it. It
Okay.
won't do it. Um, so, Les, this has
Yes.
been
Another episode of Black Boomer Besties from Brooklyn.